Welcome back to another episode of the Crime Scene Insiders. I'm one of your hosts, Angela Davies, and I'm here with my co-host, Dion Watson, and we're going to take you back under the barrier tape.
In our last episode, we were joined by Rebecca Jones, who discussed her career as a CSI with us. And she also discussed her personal journey with mental health issues, particularly around PTSD. And we think that this is such an important topic, and there is still so much stigma around this that we think the only way to overcome that is for us to continue having these conversations, being really open and honest about personal journeys. So, what we thought we would do in this episode is discuss our own experience with mental health and base that around our journey as CSIs as well. So, Ange, to get us started, looking at the bigger picture, how do you think the work of a CSI impacts upon people's mental health?
I think that's a really good question, but probably also quite a complex one. Uh,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah, I can only really speak from my own experience, but generically, what I would say is that I think that it's very difficult to walk away from a job like this unscathed. And
Yeah.
I think that I was always quite lucky with my mental health. So we talked to Rebecca last week, and she talked very openly and very bravely about her PTSD. We know other colleagues that have suffered with PTSD and also other mental health issues. Um, and I never suffered anything like that, fortunately. So I do feel really lucky in that sense. But it's only when I think about it and look back and reflect that I can see ways in which it did actually impact that I didn't recognize at the time. And I can only talk from my, like I say, from my own experience because everybody's experience and journey is unique to them.
Yeah.
For me, I have had other mental health issues, I have had therapy, but it's never necessarily been or started as a result of being from the job. As a crime scene investigator or as a disaster response consultant. It's been other things in my life. And often when I've gone to therapy, my therapist expected me to talk about the role,
Yeah.
and then I've not, and they're quite shocked. And again,
Yeah.
that's why sometimes I think, okay, I came out quite unscathed, and that's fortunate. But I don't believe that we ever know what will tip us over or what will impact us, and also when it might bite us in the ass.
Yeah. Yeah.
We We're no longer crime scene investigators. We've worked more recently in disaster response, but there's nothing to say that years down the line that something's not going to trigger something that we've buried really deeply.
Yeah. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it because I think a lot of people do think it would be in the moment, kind of, if you're dealing with a really traumatic job or something that's really impactful, at that moment it would impact you, but that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, not always. And the reason that I say it as well is because we've talked about some of the cases that we've worked on in this podcast and in the training that we've delivered previously, and when we've worked with other people. Um, and in being able to talk about our experiences, it goes to show how much we remember, how much we have still in there. And
Yeah.
some of those scenes that we've worked on, some of the ones that I've worked on, I can put myself straight back into the scene. So I can still see the victim. I can still see the person I was working with. I can still smell the smells. I can still remember some of my trauma responses or some of that fight or flight response. I can still remember some of the really emotional ones, and there are some standout ones for me that are buried and are still quite upsetting. So, although I say I feel like I came away quite unscathed because I didn't have a significant impact, such as PTSD or another severe mental health issue or trauma that has stuck with me, all of those things have stuck with me. All of those things have stayed with me. And I think there are some that will stay with me for the rest of my life. And that's why I say I think it's difficult to walk away from a job like that unscathed.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you. And like you say, if you can recall them so vividly, like you mentioned there, that you can still smell it, you can still
Yeah.
see the sights, you can really put yourself back in that situation. And if you can remember that so vividly, can that, like you say, is that really coming away unscathed? Or that's obviously become kind of a core memory for you, hasn't it? So although, like you say, you haven't had a big incident in that moment, it's got to have impacted in some ways, hasn't it?
Yeah, and like I say, you never know in this life when something's going to bite you in the ass and you don't know the reason.
No, no. Um, can I take you back to something you said in there? So when you first started talking about it, you said that actually you didn't have anything in the moment, but looking back now, you can see that there was a few things that you could remember and notice about yourself, that the way you dealt with it. Um, would you talk about any of those instances? What is it that you see looking back that you think actually that was a response?
Well, one which is not very healthy or a healthy coping mechanism. I'd get home after some shifts and think, God, I need a glass of wine.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the truth of it. That
I'm sure what other colleagues, I know I've done it. I'm sure what other colleagues listening will have done exactly the same.
Yeah, that's I think sometimes about decompressing and de-stressing, isn't it? Um,
Yes.
and again, fortunately, that didn't become unhealthy for me or an unhealthy coping mechanism. There have been times
Yeah.
probably throughout my life when actually maybe it has been,
Yeah.
but again, not necessarily relative to the job at the time, because I was always really conscious of drinking because we do so much driving as crime scene investigators. I was always
Yes.
so conscious of that. And also because we see so many awful things and awful sights, and you never know what you're going to go to or what pace you're going to be working
Yeah.
at. I never wanted to do it with a hangover. I couldn't.
Or that job is a hangover. Like that's not what you need or want, is it? Like,
Really, no, it really isn't. So, fortunately, that didn't become an unhealthy coping mechanism for me. But there were times where I just think, oh, I need a glass of wine.
yeah.
There are times then I was really upset where I actually struggled within the scene and I struggled to compose myself and keep my emotion under control because it was so traumatic. Um,
Yeah.
one of the worst things for me often was dealing with the living.
Yeah.
Um, and some of the things that we used to do is deal with child abuse. And one of the cases that stick with me, I'd say looking back now that that traumatized me, it broke my heart. I went to the hospital to photograph a little girl who'd been beaten and abused and sexually assaulted.
Oh, that's awful one.
It was horrendous. And her mum had, and dad had separated, and the mum had got a new partner, and the new partner had been abusing her and beating her, and he'd thrown her down the stairs. And when I got to the hospital, the mum and the new partner had been arrested, but the dad was at the hospital and he was distraught. And this little girl, she was about 4, and she was a beautiful little thing. She had big ringlets, lovely big eyes.
Oh,
And then she was just black and blue. She
oh,
was
that's horrendous.
covered in bruises from head to toe. And of course, it was my job to document them and photograph them, which, when there's so many injuries, can take some time.
Yeah. And then
So
a little 4-year-old for them to understand and grasp what you're doing as well. Even that's difficult in itself.
but this was one of the biggest heartbreaking things for her age. She was so switched on and she was so calm. So she was sat playing with the doll. And I got down on the floor next to her. And the hospital had like a little children's area and she was in this play area bit. So I got down on the floor next to her and I was talking to her. And I told her who I was and I was saying that she had some bruises and I was there to take some photographs of them and would that be okay? And she was saying, yes, that's okay. And then she said, I don't want my daddy to cry. Oof,
Oh,
that
oh,
broke my
bless
heart.
her.
She said, I don't
Oh,
want my daddy to cry. And it was really heartbreaking because he was over in the corner and he was sobbing. And I was struggling, but this little girl's been so brave and just playing with a doll and thinking about other people. So
Oh, bless her.
I started taking her photographs, and so I was chatting to her throughout. And because I was taking quite a few, at one point I said, are you still okay? And she said, I'm okay. Are you okay?
Oh,
And I just remember it to this day. I'm okay. Are you okay? And of course I said, yeah,
oh,
yes, thank you. But inside I was like, no, I'm really not. And I was, I had the camera up to my face and I could feel the tears. And I had to hold myself
yeah,
together and get through it. And of course, I did, because it's part of your role, isn't it? You've got to be professional. And also, I didn't want to frighten her or put my emotion on her, but it was really difficult. And then I remember walking out and leaving the hospital. And as I was walking down the corridor, I was just in floods. And I got back in the
oh,
van and I was in bits.
yeah,
And it was heartbreaking. And I can still see her face. I can still see her injuries. Yeah, I can take
oh,
myself back there. And I knew then that I was upset. I knew that I was being impacted by this scene. And I needed a break, really. But I was on back shift and I was on my own. And I had another job lined up.
ugh.
So I gave myself a
So you
five
just had to
minute
crack
breather
on.
in the van. Took
Yeah,
some deep breaths and took 5 minutes before I moved on. But then you kind of crack on. And sometimes we do that. We compartmentalize and put it in a box so we
we
can move
do,
on and
don't
do the
we?
next job, don't we?
Yeah, we do. And that sounds like such a difficult job. And I think ones involving children often do really knock us, don't they?
Yeah,
But you managed to do the job and you coped and you
yeah.
got through it and you did what you needed to do. So, what do you think in the moment when you were dealing with that little girl, what helped you cope with it? Was it that did you start detaching from it, or like what was it that helped you get through that scene?
Oof, that's a good question. Well, detachment and compartmentalization are like our usual coping mechanisms, and dark humor. But actually, I
Yeah.
didn't use any of those in this instance. I really struggled, but I think it was the little girl.
Yeah.
She was so lovely and so calm and so resilient. I just thought, you can't put your emotion on into this situation. So
Yeah.
I don't know that I detached from her or the situation, but I detached my emotion.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it does. So kind of you used her strength in the moment and her caringness to think,
And I didn't want to
okay,
make
I
things
can't
worse
show
for her.
that.
I couldn't
Yes.
do anything for her. I really wanted to just pick her up and cuddle her and wrap her up and take care of her. And I couldn't do anything for her because I was there to be a professional to do my job. The least I could
Yeah.
do is not put any more emotion into it or show my feelings or thoughts in it, because it wasn't about me.
No. And you were there to help and you did that by gathering that evidence of the
Yeah,
abuse and recording her injuries. That's how we can help in that moment, isn't it? Making sure we get a good record,
good
quality
record.
photographs.
Yeah, thorough.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's exactly it. But that impacted me in the moment. I didn't get any therapy about it. I didn't talk really to my boss about it or go to OC Health or anything like that. I didn't report it up the chain, so to speak. I did talk to colleagues about it, so I got it out in that way. But that I had that response in the moment, and she has always stayed with me, and my heart still breaks. Like, it can still bring me to tears.
You could
And
see
that
you had emotion about it even there all these years later.
I know, and that's why I said I think that I'm fortunate because I haven't been so significantly impacted as some of our colleagues we know. But I don't think you walk out unscathed necessarily, because I think regardless of how you think you've dealt with things, there's still that trauma in there.
Yeah.
What about you?
I think much like yourself, when I was working, I wasn't significantly impacted by anything that I had to go off work for or anything like
Yeah.
that, or there wasn't a particular job that I had to go and speak to the counselor or a therapist about. But 100% have jobs that, like you, I can see everything about the scene and I can put myself straight back in there for a number of different reasons. So I do have some, like you say, one with children. There's a one that always sticks with me, um, with a little girl, and that was a neglect case. And actually, it was neglect and abuse came into it
Yeah.
as well. And then there's other jobs that have impacted me, and some of them, I think it depends where you're at in your own life, um,
Yes.
and, and things that you have personally going on. So there was one period when I was with the police and I took a period off with stress. And it wasn't to do with a specific job or anything like that at work. There was a lot going on at work at the time because it was the times that we were starting to go through the redundancy process. So we were starting to find out about jobs going and things like that. So that I'm sure in some way that stress impacted
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
But I had ill grandparents as well. I had a lot going on in relationships. And I think I was kind of a bit all over with lots of different things going on in my life. Um, but one of the things that happened just as I was about to return to work is somebody that I'm very close with attempted suicide, and I was the one that found them and
It's
had
really
to
awful.
get. So that's a really impactful thing anyway for someone to go through.
Yeah.
And the person was fine and everything. We got them to hospital. We got some therapists and things involved to help them through the issues they were having. But I don't think I realized how much that actually impacted me personally because I was just there for them. And then I went back to work, and one of the first jobs that I got called out to when I went back was a suicide.
Okay. That's really
And
hard.
yeah, it was a difficult one. And then when I went to it, the person was around the same age as the person who was close to me as well. And they were successful in it. They did die by suicide. So I think had I have went to that outside of that happening in my personal life, it wouldn't have had such an impact on me. But it really did, and it really stuck with me. But there was another element of that it stuck with me because of as well. So as we've talked about before, and something you just mentioned there, that dealing with the living and dealing with families can be really impactful.
Yeah.
And this one I went to, and I'd turned up at the same time as it was the funeral director and people who were going to be coming and collecting the body and taking the body away. And we walked in and we were just having a conversation. We're talking about, are you in at the weekend? What are your plans? Just general chit
General
chat
chit
that you
chat.
have with your colleagues, isn't it? And I walked in, and what they hadn't told us is that actually the person's mum and dad were on scene.
Oh, and they didn't warn you.
No, no warning. And they were
That's
sat
naughty.
there. Yeah, it was so that's unusual for us to deal with anyway, as well, isn't it? So that's
Yeah.
another factor. So we walked in and I was kind of took aback because I wasn't expecting it. And we're just having general chit chat, which we do. That's how we get one of the ways we get through our work. You do have that conversation, things as normal, don't you? But I wouldn't have been having that sort of conversation to walk in had I have realised that
They
mum
were
and dad
there.
were sat there.
No.
And my professional head for dealing with the family wasn't on
Switched
whilst
on.
I was doing that. Yeah. So I walked in and had to very quickly change. And then the minute they seen me and the other people coming in, they got really, really upset. and they didn't kind of understand why we were there, or the police officer had told them we were coming, but they hadn't really explained the process yet, or why I was there and what I was going to be doing. So then I had to stand and have a moment and have a conversation with them about what was happening, why I was there. So it was that impact. Then there was the impact of it was very reflective for me of what I had going on in my
In your
own life
personal life as well.
at the time. Yeah. And like I say, I don't think that would have impacted in the same way because, as we've touched upon in another episode, we do deal with a lot of death. So it doesn't stick with us in the same way. But that one did, it really did. I can see everything about it. I can remember the room layout, everything.
And did you get some help at that point for that incident? What was going on for you in your own life? Or did you cop?
So So, not to do with the incident as such, but I already was booked in with occupational health because I'd been off for a period with stress. So, because I'd been off with that, I already had an appointment booked to go in and have a review. Because when you've been off for a little while, they'll make you go in and have a review and make sure you're okay and see if there's anything needs done. But I hadn't had it yet.
Right.
So I hadn't had that. I'd returned. This happened on the first day back,
Oh, okay.
and then I went in for my appointment. So it wasn't to do with that incident, no, but I did get some support. But even that can be really strange, and I think we might have touched on this in a podcast before, but actually having the right people in place to give that counselling can be really difficult in itself, can't it? Because
Yeah.
I remember I went to that appointment and the lady I dealt with, she was really lovely, but she wasn't prepared for what I had to talk about.
No.
And she was kind of a bit took aback because then she asked about other jobs and things like that. And I'd said it wasn't the work that I'd been off for. I explained a bit about what was going on in my personal life. But I did then mention this job and I said, and I've just come back and actually went into this job and that did impact me. I can, not that it was stopping us doing anything, and it felt impactful.
Yeah.
And as I discussed that with her, she kind of got a bit upset and then was like, "Oh, bless you. Can I give you a hug?" And got up and just give me a hug straight away.
Did you, before you had a chance to respond, whether you
Yeah,
wanted
didn't
to
even
talk or not?
respond. She was just like, "Oh, can I give you a hug?" And just got up and give me a big hug. Now, we're huggers, aren't we?
We are huggers. Yeah. We
So
are huggers.
I can see why in that moment someone would, but I'm not sure it was kind of the right
The right
place
time.
or the right
No.
setting. But she kind of looked shocked by things as well. And it's making sure you've got the right professional who's used to dealing with people who are dealing with trauma, I think. That's really important.
Yeah, we've heard a few stories where people have gone to the occupational health counsellors who are there for everybody across the board and not specifically necessarily expecting some of the things. And some of them, I think, found it interesting, and some of them have gone a bit green. And
Yeah.
then you're worried that you're impacting the person that's helping you.
Yeah, because then you feel like you're holding back a bit, don't you? And
Yeah,
that's no good when it's supposed to be about getting things off your chest and going through those motions. So yeah, I think that can make a massive difference as well.
I agree. And I do agree that whatever's going on at your in your life at the time can also result in bigger impacts at work because we're only human at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
we do our best and we have these coping mechanisms, which again we've touched upon in other episodes, but things such as the detachment, compartmentalization, the dark senses of humor, talking to our colleagues, that we've talked about those things and we have those coping mechanisms in place. But it doesn't mean that still things don't get through, does it?
No, definitely not.
Did you notice any changes in yourself over time, or has it been just when you've looked back?
I think really when I've looked back and on reflection as well, I was quite young starting as a CSI. I was only in my early 20s. So I think I had some development, I suppose, to do anyway. But looking back, I can't see any in the moment, I didn't see any real changes. Like you say, I had the times where I'd think, "Phew, that was a that was a one," and I'll have a little glass of wine or something like that. Or you just need a moment just to sit and kind of work through in your brain. Just give yourself a pause, isn't it? A pause,
Yeah,
a breath. Like that's because there's such unusual things that you're seeing and dealing with. I think you
it
do need to
is.
give yourself that little bit of process and time. But like you say, sometimes that can be difficult.
You don't always have the time, do you?
No.
So for me, I remember some of those scenes with the where trauma that were really emotional, and then I had to just crack on. But on looking back, I also do now recognize uh, when my brain was trying to keep me safe or keep me in comfort. And sometimes in these situations, I think your brain can play tricks on you. And I know
Yeah.
that it happened to me like a couple of times. And now when you look back, they seem like quite funny stories and like we laugh about them. But if I think about it in its context,
Yeah.
it probably was maybe a fight or flight response or the brain trying to keep me in safety. But some weird things happen to me at times.
Well, I think you've got to share with our listeners some of those stories then.
Well, one I can remember, I was at the death of a guy that had died from a drugs overdose, sadly. And I was down with my boss. I'd been on shift quite a while. It was getting towards the back end of the night. And so it was late, it was dark. My boss was in on duty, but I was really the only CSI who was there as supervision for the whole area. But it wasn't too bad. So he said, "Oh, I'll come down with you and come for an out." And I was glad that he did. So he came down, we met with the police officer, and at drugs deaths, we always check the body to make sure there's nothing suspicious that it is drug overdose. We often check for injection sites, make sure there's no other wounds or serious wounds. You check for drugs and drugs paraphernalia, and we'll look to see if there are any notes in case it's suicide, whether to see if it's accidental or if somebody's chosen to take their own life. We do all that kind of thing, don't we? So we were doing that. And of
Yeah.
course, we always record the scene as it is and take photographs. We had a conversation, myself, my supervisor, the police officer, and my boss says, I'm going to go and check out the kitchen, blah, blah, blah. You get on with starting recording the scene. And I was like, no problem. I take the photograph. So I'm in this room on my own and it's quite dark. And I go to take the photograph and I put my camera up. And this guy now, he's laid on the sofa and he's got one leg crossed over the other. And as I put the camera up and looked through the viewfinder, he uncrossed his legs. So I jumped a mile and smacked myself in the head with the camera. I had a proper keggy.
Oh no.
Yeah, I proper walloped myself. And I jumped and my heart was pounding and I was thinking, what was that? And so I pulled the camera away and I looked. And of course, he hadn't uncrossed his legs.
No.
It was my brain playing tricks on me. But then I was a bit like, oh my God. So I kind of scurried out of the room and I said to my boss, the weirdest thing just happened. And I told him, and he kind of half laughed at me, and he's like, "Look, are you okay?" And I was saying,
In a lot of ways, no.
"Yeah." But then again, you want to be professional, don't you? And you think, "Oh, I don't want him to think that I can't cope with this stuff." Or so he's like, are you okay?" And I'm saying, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I'm fine." And he said, "Do you want to do the photographs, or would you like me to go in and do it?" So I was like, "Oh, toughen up.
No.
No, I'm fine. I'm just being silly. I just had a little moment, but it's fine." So I went back in, and of course, I took the photographs and I did my job. But when I look back at that as well, like I say, it's quite funny now.
Yeah.
And it was quite funny the next day because I did have a bruise and I like proper whacked myself with a camera.
Okay.
So it was
Also, for our international viewers, what's a keggy Ange?
like a lump and a bruise.
Yeah. So a
Thank
nice
you.
big lump of bruise on your forehead.
But I'd hit myself in the head with the camera
That's one to
because I
explain to
thought
people, isn't it?
because I thought a dead body had uncrossed its legs. And it is funny, but at the time, looking back on it, I think that was probably I would say trauma response, but definitely my brain playing tricks on me, maybe trying to keep me safe. And thinking, because
Yeah.
it's not a normal situation to be in.
No, it's not, is
N-
it?
No.
And you mentioned there that you had a few of these stories, so I think you had another one of them in you, didn't you?
Oh, I can't share that one.
So come on, you've got to share. We're
Oh, this.
having an open, honest conversation here, Ange.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be about mental health, not my misdemeanors. Oh, so yeah, that was another instance of my brain playing tricks on me. I'm going to get you back for making me tell this story.
If anybody remembers episode 2 with the fishing rod,
Yeah,
I think she's got us.
she's got it. Yeah, it got me back. So I was going to a post-mortem one day up at a hospital. I got to the mortuary. There's a few of us there, including crime scene manager, the mortuary technician, the forensic pathologist. And they said to me, you set the mortuary up while we go and have a briefing and watch the CCTV, then we'll come in and brief you. But it's both jobs getting done at the same time, effectively.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, no problem. So the person that we were doing a post-mortem on was already out of the freezer ready. Then there was another couple of people out, and it had been a really busy weekend. So the freezers were quite full. And then funeral directors came in and dropped 2 more bodies off.
Oh, wow.
So I was surrounded. It was just me, and the funeral directors left. I think, okay, what do I need to do? First of all, I'm going to put my PPE on, my personal protective equipment. So, and there, I think because there was so many bodies about and quite a few out, I already had, I don't know, a strange feeling, I guess. I don't know how best to describe it, but the hairs on the back of my neck were up, and I think I was a bit sensitive, maybe. I don't know if that's the right word. But anyway, I go to put on my oversuit, my overshoes. So I
Yeah.
bend down, put my overshoe on, and and I'm thinking, what is that? And as we know, and we've probably discussed, bodies expel gas and they make noise sometimes. So I'm thinking that somebody's going off. So I'm looking round, my heckles are up, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness. I carry on and I think, okay, Ange, get a grip of yourself. You know what you're here to do. Professional mode. It's all good. You're all safe. Just get on with it. So then I'm putting my suit on and I bend down and I'm pulling my suit leg up and I hear, "Sss." So I jump a mile and I'm thinking, no, no, what is that? What is that?
Yeah.
So I'm looking around me, and again, I'm having a word with myself. And then I move and I hear it again. And I thought, oh no, this is enough. So I'm out of here.
You're up and off.
I can't, I can't take this. I'm out of here. So I go scurrying towards the door. And as I'm going out, the mortuary technician's coming in, and I'm a bit green. And he's like, where are you off? I said, oh no, I'm just wondering where everyone was. Everything all right? And he looked at me as if to say, what's going on? And he could tell there was something. And I said, where are you going? He said, oh, just into the mortuary. I was like, oh yeah, come on then. So he was coming back in, so I went back into the mortuary with him. And he's like, are you sure you are all right? I'm like, yeah, yeah, I'm fine. All good, all good.
Nothing to
Anyway,
see here.
nothing to see here. Of course, I was green and a bit sweaty. And then the next thing, I'm carrying on getting ready, and I hear this noise again. And I was like, oh my God. It's like, Mick, what is that? Like, seriously, what is it? I keep hearing it. It's driving me mental. And then he couldn't stop laughing for ages. And I was like, what's so funny? This is like, I'm not finding this very funny. And he said it's one of those air fresheners, those motion sensitive air fresheners. So every time I'd been moving around, I'd been setting it off myself.
You're
So
trying to get away from this noise and it's following you. I wonder why.
I actually scared myself with a motion sensor. Which is
Brilliant.
just ridiculous. But again, the environment, when I look back, again, it's funny and it was quite funny at the time, although I was in fight or flight because I ran to the door. I was like, no, no, I'm out of here.
You definitely went with the flight
I went
the
with
flight
flight.
there, didn't you?
It's unusual for me. I usually go for fight or freeze, but I was in flight mode this time, and I was at that door, and I was glad that the mortuary technician was coming back in because I thought, all right, it's all good, it's all good. Another person around's helpful, and he laughed so hard, and I was just mortified. So it was funny. It was funny at the time because it was ridiculous, and it is funny when you look back. But actually, I was having a fight flight response. It was a strange environment. There was a lot of death
Yeah,
around me. And
yeah.
even though I felt comfortable and confident in my job, it's not like I'd not been in that environment before. I was glad to be at the post-mortem, which might sound terrible, but again, we've talked about it. They're intriguing. It was a part of the job I enjoyed, so I was glad to be at the post-mortem. Despite all of that, in that environment at that time, I still went into fight or flight and panicked. And again, that was my brain playing tricks on me.
Yeah, because like you've said there, it is a strange situation, and it's a situation that most people would want to get away from,
Get out of,
but
yeah.
we want to get in there, and then as our job, we've got to look at the intricate details of those scenes. So not only are we viewing it, but we are looking at it in like microscopic detail as
Detail.
well,
Yeah,
aren't we? So
that's true.
it is a strange situation. Although it's our job, it's not within our nature, or it's not what our brain would usually like us to deal with, is it?
No, your brain likes to keep you in comfort, and that's not comfortable at times.
It's definitely not. No.
I've had it as well when I've been in the mortuary and I've done a couple of post-mortems back to back. And then I remember this one night, and my nana had died a couple of years prior. And then I'd been in the mortuary most of the day and night, and it was late at night, and I was driving home, and I kept looking in the rearview mirror, and I was thinking I was seeing shadows. I kept thinking I was seeing the bodies that we'd worked on, but then also a couple of times my nana when I
Oh,
looked up into the
really?
rear view. Yeah, and I thought, come on now, brain. That's not funny because I can't be jumping a mile while I'm driving. Have a word
No.
with yourself.
It is
I just,
creepy like that, though, isn't it, sometimes?
yeah, I decided to believe it was my nana and take comfort in it, and I just had a chat with her instead.
Yeah.
That was all right. But yeah, my brain's played tricks on me in a few instances like that. There's just a couple that I can remember. Where you think, run.
But you know you can't. You've got to be dead professional.
Did it ever happen to you?
I was trying to think there. I can't bring any to mind at the moment. One might come to us. There's often times where you're there and you kind of get the hairs on your neck or something will go up and you're just a bit like, oh.
Yeah, it does happen
Yeah.
quite often, doesn't it?
Yeah. I suppose you've mentioned the ones kind of around scenes around death, and then you mentioned the child abuse ones that are ones that stick with you. But it's not even necessarily ones to do with death or children. Sometimes random ones stick with you as well, don't they? And I think ones like that for me are usually ones around vulnerable people
Oh,
and
yeah,
sometimes
me
the
too.
elderly as well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is
really
there any
stick
of
with
those that
you.
stick out for you?
There's one that always sticks in my brain, and it wasn't really awful scene in terms of the sort of scenes we've just been discussing there. It was a burglary, and it was to an old lady's house, and she lived on a bit of land with her family. They had their own house, and then she had like a bungalow within the land as well.
Yeah.
So she had her own house, but she had her family close by. But her family were away on holiday and she was by herself and somebody had broke in and she'd rang the police who came out and there wasn't actually a lot that I could do, unfortunately. A lot of the stuff that they'd touched they'd taken away with them.
Yeah.
But she was really vulnerable and she was by herself and she was just in such a state that somebody
Oh,
had been in her house and it had really scared her. And then because she didn't have the support of her family around, I think they were only coming back the next day or something, but she was still by herself. She said that she didn't usually feel very vulnerable. She'd always felt really safe. And because someone had come into her space, it made her really think about her vulnerability and what she was like being by herself. And she was like, and what if they had have come in the room? Because she was in the house at the time as well. So
Yeah.
she'd been in bed when they were in, and it just really shook her up, which it would anyone. I think anyone knowing that somebody's been in your house is quite a big thing anyway. But because she was so frail, bless her, and vulnerable and alone, she was just so shook up. And I sat with her a while. Thankfully, it wasn't a day where I had shed loads on. So made sure I cleaned up the fingerprint powder after myself and things, which sometimes you don't have the time to do you?
No.
So you give a victim advice and they'll clean up once you've gone.
Yeah.
But in this instance, I just really felt for us. I helped it clean up and I made her a cup of tea and I sat and I had a cup of tea and just a conversation with her. And that always sticks with us. And like I say, it's not because of it's not a graphic scene or anything like that, but just how vulnerable she was really stuck with us. And I really
Heartbreaking.
felt for her. Yeah.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I've had one similar. And I think that's what I was saying earlier when I say you never know what it is that's going to impact you
Yeah.
or how it's going to impact you or why. It doesn't necessarily always have to be these big trauma ones. Sometimes it's
No.
seeing other people's pain, isn't it? And some of their distress as well.
Yeah.
I had one similar. It was a burglary and the guy was elderly, but he was blind.
Oh.
And he lived with his daughter. His daughter took care of him. But she'd gone out to work. But he had everything set up in his house so he could negotiate his own way around it
Yeah.
while she was out at work. And he would be all right in the home on his own because it was set out that worked really hard on getting everything where he needed it. And the burglars come in, and it was in the afternoon as well. It was broad daylight, and they just tried the look, I think, trying the door and walked in realised he was in. And now normally that'd be enough to make some them scarper, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But I think they must have realised that he was blind. So they
Oh.
continued to burgle him. But not only did they continue to burgle him, they also tormented and taunted him
Oh.
and moved things around and moved furniture around. So when I got there, he was just kind of stuck
Oh
because he didn't know where
no.
anything was and there was too many trip hazards that moved that kind of trashed the place. It was horrendous.
They are
I
heartbreaking scenes, those, aren't they?
I did let a tear escape then because he couldn't see me. I had a
Oh.
tear and I was thinking, don't cry, Ange, don't cry. And I, like you, fortunately didn't have many jobs on that afternoon. I had a little bit more space and time. So I helped try and put some of the furniture back in place, like he described, to just to try and get it okay just until his daughter got home, and then kind of got him
Oh.
sat and made him a cuppa and sat with him for a bit and talked to him. But that absolutely broke my heart. That when I got in the van and walked away from that, I cried as well.
Yeah. They are difficult ones, aren't they? And I think they're the sort of ones that people don't realise actually the emotional toll that they do
That they
take on
take.
you. Yeah.
I think we've said it before. It's just humanity, isn't it, and how people treat other humans. How you can do that to a fellow human being, but
Yeah.
particularly a vulnerable one. We should be looking after the vulnerable in our society, not
Yeah.
tormenting them and torturing them and stealing from them. It makes
Yeah.
me angry in one instance
Yeah.
and very sad and heartbroken in
Sad and
another.
another.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because there is people who prey on that, unfortunately, and it's one of the sides of society that we see in this role that is difficult to deal with when you know we have people who walk among us who deliberately look out for those vulnerabilities to purely take advantage of.
that's the thing. And people, burglars are often do it as a job, don't they? Do you remember in our training we were told you have burglars who see it as a job and they'll go on, they'll scout places out and they'll look for vulnerabilities in property or vulnerabilities in the people living there. They'll watch for comings and goings and look for windows open. And you think, can't make a career out of it. But then lo and
Yeah.
behold, you do get what we call, and what we ended up calling, career burglars.
Yeah.
Do
Career
it for a
criminals,
living.
aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you just think, get yourself another job, mate. But as you know, I've actually been burgled. So I
Yeah.
know what it's like to feel that violated. And it was very strange for me because it happened after I left the job as well. So I'd been a crime scene investigator and I'd been helping all these victims of crimes over these years. And then you give crime prevention advice and you try to be an ear and let them know that they're safe. And often one of the things that we used to say was that it's not very often that they come back to the same place twice, which is true. I mean,
Yes.
it does happen, doesn't it? But more
It
often than
does.
not, people don't tend to come back to the same place more than once. So you give all this advice, but actually, when you've been burgled, then I'd left the job. So I knew all this stuff. I had all this practical advice. I had all this training. I dealt with it myself. And then I was burgled. And it is a real violation of your
Yeah.
personal space. It's a horrible
Yeah.
feeling. So back when we started in the police, asking for help or asking to go to our health or counselling, it wasn't something that we did or did quite openly. Did you think there was a lot of stigma attached to asking for help then? Or were you comfortable with it?
People didn't really talk about it, is the thing.
Part of that, you think, oh, am I not being professional? Is
Mm,
it affecting my professionalism?
yeah.
People are going to think I'm weak. Will I not get sent to that job? Will I miss an opportunity?
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things that I think come along with that attitude.
Yeah. And I know we've heard that from some of the disaster work that we've done as well.
Yes,
So do you think there's a stigma of it in that arena as well?
I do. I think that a lot of the people out there again have that mentality of just get on with it. It's expected. And again, I know of conversations that have happened where it's been said, I wouldn't take people on deployment if they'd had therapy.
Wow.
Mm,
I find that so strange.
I think it's bonkers. I think that if somebody has had therapy, they're going to be a better resource to you than those that are not, those that are burying it. Because if somebody is conscious enough and emotionally intelligent enough to be in touch with their own emotions and their own responses and then seek help and get help from it, much more likely to deal with it and process it and move through it than somebody who just buries it, and then uses some of those unhealthy coping mechanisms that we've talked about.
Yeah.
Because actually, I think in the disaster response field, we saw a lot of those unhealthy coping mechanisms come to a head, probably
Yeah.
a lot more, particularly drinking, I think.
Yeah. I think because in those situations as well, it's an intense situation, isn't it? You
It
you
is.
all you're all about the work. You live and breathe the work and the people that you work with.
Yeah.
It's a very tight-knit, intense experience that you go through when you're on them. And sometimes that like we were saying before, you say the drink, you'd come back and think, I'll just have a little drink just to calm down.
Yeah, and again, we all did.
Yeah,
And we
but
needed it
then
sometimes to
sometimes it goes,
unwind.
yeah, but it can go to the extreme sometimes, can't it?
Well, it's had detrimental impact on some people beyond longer term than just the deployment or
Yeah,
as a short-term thing.
yeah. And that's the thing, short-term crutches sometimes are good in the moment, but they're not good long-term strategies, are they?
No.
What would you say is a good long-term coping mechanism or strategy for people who are dealing with this sort of thing? It's a big question,
That's
really, isn't it?
yeah. Can you go and ask someone else? um, it's about living quite consciously with what's going on for you and recognizing whether things are changing for you. I also think that sometimes it's difficult when you're in it to recognize some changes in yourself. So you'd hope and think it's important for those around you to be
Yeah,
able to spot any changes in you, your behaviors, your moods, your emotions,
yeah,
to hopefully be able to say those things. And then
yeah,
if therapy is the right thing for somebody, then therapy. But again, it's different for everybody, isn't it?
yeah. I think so. It is a personal journey. I think some of them that you mentioned, they are healthier ways of doing it, aren't they? Like you say, therapy maybe isn't for everyone, but it is. Well, I think in one way or another, actually, everybody would be a bit better off for having a bit of therapy every now and again, to be honest.
I do. I actually think that I've become a bit more hippy dippy over the last few years, as you well know. I call it hippy dippy, but it's not. It's just a bit more holistic, I guess. And I think that meditation and breath work and living more consciously are much healthier coping mechanisms for life. I feel like breath work and meditation should be taught in school.
Well, yeah, it's a well-being technique, isn't it? And it's useful for
Yeah.
everyone in all walks of life, really. It doesn't have to be someone who's dealing with trauma in the way that we are, but we all experience trauma in different ways. And even if you're not thinking about it in trauma, in terms of stress, we all deal with stress, different everyday life stresses. And I think those things help even with that, don't they?
To do. So I have throughout my life had therapy, not throughout my whole life, but in probably more recent years, probably in the last 10 years or so, I've had talk therapy with a psychotherapist. And then also more holistically, I have talk therapy, but with someone who practices kind of Reiki and mindfulness and breath work and meditation, that kind of thing. And at one point, the psychotherapist suited me more, and then it wasn't really working for me in the same way. And then at another point, this holistic approach has suited me more. And I think that it's often about finding what's right for you and the right therapist for you. And I don't mind talking about that. I've had a lot go on throughout my life and a lot of trauma throughout my life that's in addition to the job. And that's
Yeah.
why I think it's unbelievable sometimes that I have I was going to say got away with it. That's not the right term. But
Hmm.
so I've had trauma in different ways throughout my life and different things impact me. So I've ended up seeking out therapy and some of it to deal with stuff from when I was younger, because actually that stuff starts impacting on you. And if you're not conscious and you don't process and you haven't dealt with things, it does bite you in the ass eventually. And that's what I was saying earlier. You never know what or when.
Yeah.
You never know how much we've stored up. And I've also had it and had help with burnout. So not as a crime scene investigator or as a disaster response consultant, but in other aspects and contexts of my life, I have suffered with burnout, which has then had a significant impact on my mental health. And more recently, I've been going through a darker period and had much lower moods for various reasons. And again, we'll touch upon it on another episode. But I think that regardless of whether it's directly relative to being a CSI, trauma is trauma.
Yeah.
And at some points, we need help.
Yeah.
And it should be okay to ask for help and seek that help without being judged
Yeah. I
or without there
agree.
being this stigma attached. Like Rebecca talked about PTSD, but that's one aspect of mental health. I've had burnout and low mood more recently. There are other aspects. And
Yeah.
you yourself have been through your own experience, haven't you?
Yeah. So I've suffered over the last maybe 4 years, something like that, with depression. Um, and you mentioned earlier about other people noticing signs and things like that. And I remember when I started going through it, I just thought I was a bit sad randomly, and I didn't know
Yeah.
really what it was for, but I had low mood, and it was during COVID as well. So
Yeah.
I think that had an impact because I didn't have the support network in the same way that I would usually have. And I think COVID's impacted a lot of people's mental health massively. That's a whole
Yeah,
other
hold it.
topic in
It is.
itself. But yeah, I started with a low mood then and kind of withdrawing, and I didn't have energy. And then we'd had a conversation, and I remember you saying, I think you might be suffering with depression, and you had sent us was it the NHS questionnaire that you can do?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and you go through some questions, and it kind of gives you a score to see if it thinks that is one of the things you're suffering with. And I remember I went through it, and it took me over an hour to go through this survey because I just sat and sobbed and sobbed and sobbed going through it. And then, like, when the score came out at the end, I was like actually really quite severely depressed at that point, and I had some anxiety as well, which kind of they were impacting each other, but was mostly depression. And like you say, you had said, actually, I think I've noticed a few changes in you. You haven't seemed
Yeah.
quite yourself. And I don't think you realize, like you say, sometimes in yourself, because I said to you, I don't understand. Just like I've just happened this week out of nowhere. And you were like, actually,
Not this
on
week.
speaking to you, you said like, oh, actually, it was maybe a month or so in
Been
the
going on
lineup.
for yeah, been going on for a while, hadn't it?
Yeah, and you would notice quite a few things. And I don't think I well, there was something wrong with us. I was suffering with depression, but I felt like I was just going insane. I had such low energy. By this point, I was struggling to get myself up and get washed and get out of bed. Like, I was really starting to struggle by that point. But you don't realize the small things that you start doing in the lead up to these things.
No, it's a gradual decline, isn't it?
Mm. So, yeah, I think noticing that. And then I think Rebecca mentioned last week that when she got a diagnosis, that she kind of just collapsed and said it was a relief that she had a diagnosis. 'Cause it's like, oh, it's not just me. There is a something. Like people say, it's just putting a label on, but actually sometimes getting that diagnosis is a massive relief because you feel like this is normal. This is what people go through. And
Yeah,
I did feel like that because I got in touch with the doctors and things, and they confirmed and said, yeah, depression. And then I went down the route of therapy and medication. And
yeah.
medication at that point was something, again, that I think there's a massive stigma around.
I agree.
And I was so reluctant. I didn't want to do it. And the doctor said, look, just have a think about it. And then again, I'd been speaking to you about it, spoke to family and things. And I think it was yourself and said it was maybe it'll help settle you maybe in the interim so that you can start doing the talk therapy. Because at that point, I wasn't in a place where I could even have a conversation. I was just sobbing all the time.
You weren't really functional enough, were you? And you weren't
No.
in the right place or frame of mind to be able to process or talk about anything because you were just in such a dark place.
Yeah. So and again, I know it's not right for everyone, but for me, having that kind of two-pronged approach was really beneficial and a massive help. And again, I don't think it was anything to do with the work that we've done. Like, as I was going through my therapy and things, I didn't come back to any instances that I was like, this is really stuck with us or anything. It was all a lot of personal things, and I think it was just a build up of different things over the years. But interestingly, maybe a year or so again, I had a flare up of my depression and I went back into therapy. And my therapist then said they were expecting us to talk about the work. And I was like,
Yeah.
no, I'm fine. But it was a particular month anyway. And in that month, I'd had a lot of, over different years, I'd had deaths in the family. And there was one of the air crashes we'd worked on, and the date was then.
Yeah.
And I'd mentioned it, and I was like, oh, I always think of it on this date. And she was like, well, see, she said, when a date comes round and you just remember something and you start thinking about the victims and things like that, although that mightn't be the reason you're here, it definitely has impacted you because it's imprinted on your brain that date.
Right.
So, yeah, we're saying it's not to do with our work, but there's got to be aspects of it that has impacted in certain ways, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I also have found in my time that some more of my challenging times and where some of my mental health suffered, where I've become more stressed or had lower mood, has often been about people that I'm working with,
Mm,
people and unethical situations and bullying.
yeah,
And I've witnessed quite a lot of that across my career. And
yeah.
they're some of the things that I have struggled with over the years.
They're kind of the human elements again, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like almost we can detach from the awful sights we're seeing, but when that real human element comes in,
yeah,
that's when it impacts. I suppose because in some crime scenes, you're seeing the scene.
yeah,
You don't necessarily always have a body there. There's not always necessarily that interaction. It's just you and the evidence.
yeah.
It's when the human element comes in
So
and
that it
the
brings
people, the
emotion, doesn't
trauma,
it?
the living. Yeah.
Yeah, it brings that emotion in with it, which can then be difficult.
But if you were dealing with a lot of trauma like we have, and you learned coping mechanisms and professional detachment, but then you've got people who are not so great that you're working with, and there's different scenarios or situations going on, such as bullying, such as unethical situations, such as backstabbing. I think that that makes the work harder and the trauma bigger.
I agree. And I
You
think
start,
that's kind of that support network, isn't it? Because we've said all along, speaking with your colleagues is one
yeah,
massive crutch, one huge support. So if you start actually having a disconnect between colleagues as well, then you're not getting that relief or that support there either.
that's true. Yeah. It does create a real disconnect, doesn't it? And it makes everything more
Mm,
stressful.
100%, yeah, it does. So, to take things back to crime scene investigation, how do you think things have changed for CSIs now compared to what it used to be when we first started when it comes to mental health?
I think that things have improved. I think that there's much more knowledge and awareness around mental health on the front line, but I still think that there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah,
Rebecca said in our last episode that she's doing some research around the mental health of CSIs, and I think that's really important because crime scene investigators often get left behind in this stuff, and it makes me a bit mad sometimes because we don't often get classified as frontline response. So currently, you've got your emergency services workers, and things have been put in place for them, or more things have started to be put in place for them, because there was a time when it was really bad for emergency workers as well. But things have improved, and there's more legislation around it and more policy around helping people with their mental health who work in these job roles. But those emergency workers are frontline staff. They deal with the public, they can get into physicality with the public, they can be assaulted, they can be in dangerous situations, as well as seeing the trauma. For crime scene investigators, I still believe that we're seen as kind of a secondary because we're classed as police staff. So I don't think it's
Yeah.
considered that we're seeing trauma in the same way. And I would actually disagree with that. And I think that police staff still see and cope with a lot of trauma.
Yeah.
And this idea that we're not frontline, it comes from how much you deal with and interact with the public. And if we take it back to 2012, when our force was going through restructuring, you remember they brought in an external firm. They
Yeah.
weren't really given much of a remit about our role. And I think one person came out and spent a few hours in the van with a CSI, but that was about it. And what was said is we weren't frontline, we weren't dealing with the public. And that makes me really mad.
Well, yeah. Considering our role, volume crime that we've discussed, most volume crime is involved in people's homes, in people's businesses. We're going into those situations. We're dealing with the general public on a daily basis.
Daily basis, whether they're victims of crimes, whether they're
Hmm.
offenders of crimes.
Yeah.
We deal with both victims and offenders. And I know of CSIs that have been in dangerous situations where offenders have returned to scene. For
Yeah.
instance, if they've not been apprehended as yet. It
Or
happens, it
hidden
has
in the
happened.
scene.
Hidden in the scene, yeah. And I
Yeah.
think that the cases that we've talked about today all involve the public.
Yeah.
The
In
stuff that's
one way
been
or another.
traumatic for us has involved the public. And
Yeah.
so, again, we're not emergency response in the same ways, we don't respond in the same blue light level way, but we still do
Yeah.
deal
We're
with the
not there at the
public.
live end, are we?
Not while it's live, no. But we still do deal with the public on a daily basis. We still deal with a lot of trauma. So I know that CSIs don't fall under the same legislative framework or the trim that emergency services do. And I think that's
It's
wrong.
crazy.
So
It
often,
is.
in terms of mental health, I think that more forces are starting to incorporate CSIs and considering them in that way. But actually, it's not a national standard, it's a force by force basis, as is everything in policing and crime scene and forensics,
Of
which
course.
is, I think, some of the places that it really falls down
Hmm.
across the board. But some places are still relying on that occupational health and union support, and they
Yeah.
don't come under that framework. So I think there's still a long way to go on, and a long way in getting the role recognised for what it is and the amount of trauma that we're seeing and dealing with. And I think the likes of Rebecca's research will and should go a long way to help in that, because at governmental level, we're not recognised under that framework. I'm saying we're like we're still in it because it makes me mad.
Well, we consider it still our line of work
Oh,
and the field
yeah,
that we're in and are passionate about, aren't we? So,
yeah. But so I do think things have improved. And I think on a force by force basis, I do think TRIM, which is the trauma informed framework that they've now got, is applied. But I think there's still a long way to go and a lot of work. And I still do think that there is some stigma. Again, I think we've come a long way and more people are talking about it and we're having more conversations. But I still think there's a lot of work to be done.
I agree. I think that's why it's important to keep having these conversations, isn't it?
Yeah.
And people don't realize how many people struggle with the mental health until you have these conversations. Like we mentioned before, our own struggles, and until I went through that episode, I didn't realize how many of my family and friends even had been through it. And opening up about it felt like a massive weight off my shoulders. But then as I was discussing it, actually other people were sharing their stories, and you don't realize how common these issues actually
No,
are.
you don't. Well, I remember when I was diagnosed with burnout, and I decided that I didn't know much about it, so I had to look into it. I did some research, of course, sought some help for it, and I decided to share some of that on the likes of LinkedIn, and I got so many comments and so many private messages from people saying, "Thank you so much for sharing. Actually, I've been going through a similar thing."
Yeah,
And it makes people feel less alone. The more we talk about it, the more we
I
share
agree.
it, people feel less alone. And I think it makes it easier to open up the conversation. There's nothing to be
Yes.
ashamed about. We're only humans. We're
Yeah,
multifaceted beings with lots of different physical, mental, spiritual, psychological aspects to us.
that's right.
And some of us go into fields that are really quite traumatic. And we
Yeah,
wouldn't be human if it didn't have some level of impact, I don't think.
I
If you
agree.
detach so far and you dehumanize, it doesn't have any impact, then I think that's when you really want to start worrying.
I agree. I agree completely. And I think something you said there about there's nothing wrong with saying I need help or anything like that. Something that stuck with me that my therapist had said, and I think it ties in really lovely with what you just said, is she said if you had something like a broken arm, for example, you wouldn't feel ashamed going to the hospital and saying, I've broke my arm, I need help, and
Yeah,
would help recover that. And there's nothing wrong in the same vein as when you've got something mentally going on with you. There's nothing wrong in approaching people and saying, actually, I need some help right now.
exactly. And life can be hard. Life throws all sorts of curveballs at us, and sometimes it can be really hard. And I think currently, globally, we're going through some really difficult stuff and some really big shifts.
Yeah,
Like anybody not to be impacted by what's going on the world at the moment, like I can't imagine it.
no,
Because we're going through some awful times, and we have been for a number of years.
it's true. It can be a dark place at times, can't it?
It can. Good job, we're little rays of sunshine.
Especially with this episode.
And so, looking back, what would you tell your younger self about looking after your mental health? Because you were saying when you went into being a CSI that you were in your early 20s and you still had some development to do.
Mm.
Now, as a woman in a as a
Beep.
21-year-old.
Thank you.
Looking back, what would you tell your younger self, do you think, about looking after your mental health?
It's a good question, Ange. Very good question. I think probably along the lines of what we've spoke about, really, be confident and conscious of your own mental health. So if you feel like you're not okay with something, not just bottling it up and not
Mm,
speaking about it. Because at one point in my life, I was like a little pressure cooker
yeah,
and I'd take something on board and it would just sit there. I wouldn't do anything about it. I'd take something on board and it would sit there until eventually I would just explode.
yeah,
And it was just because I'd sat on everything. And I think actually that's human nature with a lot of people. But I think just being conscious of that and when you realize that something's not right, reaching out for help and looking to your support networks if that's how you deal with it. For me, I know kind of getting outside and being in nature and going for a walk, that helps me. So making sure that you're doing those things, the healthy things like that, not just the I'm gonna hit the wine.
yeah.
Yeah, just being conscious. How about
I
yourself?
I agree. I often think that as when you're on a bit of a slippery slope, mentally, for me, it's often the self-care stuff that starts to go out the window.
Yes.
I'll stop reading on a night and start scrolling. Stop doing my
Yeah.
meditation in the morning.
Yeah.
Stop doing things that are nice for me. Maybe we'll have an extra glass of wine or choose a chocolate bar instead of choosing something healthy. Like it's just the little self-care things that start to slip. And I think that it's been about more conscious about that. I've been these days living much more consciously. So I start to catch those little things now because I know that they don't help me. I know that it only kind of exacerbates that spiral.
Yeah.
So if you can live more consciously and catch some of those things and choose differently for yourself, I think that's really helpful.
Yeah. Because if you get too deep into it, it becomes really difficult to get out of that, doesn't it? So if you catch you before you spiral.
It does, but the problem is, because we're saying, what would you tell your younger self looking back? I think that sometimes it takes experience and to live through things for you to learn the lessons to then become more conscious. And sometimes you've got to
Yeah,
learn them for
that's also very
yourself.
true.
Sometimes you've got to learn them for yourself, and sometimes you've got to learn them the hard way. So it is a tricky question.
It is. Bit of a loaded one, isn't it?
Yeah, but like you say, make sure you ask for the help when you need it. Find your
Yeah.
voice.
So, I think that brings us into a really good place to wrap this episode up. Hopefully, that's been insightful and useful. Hopefully, you've enjoyed the episode as well. Although it's an interesting and can be quite a dark subject, I hope we've had some laughs along the way for you as well.
I usually do.
Yeah. So, thank you to everyone for joining us this week, and we will be back in a fortnight's time where we will take you back under the barrier tape.
Bye.
Bye.